Today, we are analyzing a pop culture commentary transcript that explores the Western backlash to a wholesome McDonald's Japan anime commercial featuring a traditional family.
Anchoring the broader cultural commentary firmly to the central subject, the McDonald's advertisement, throughout the entire piece will significantly elevate the narrative cohesion.
Yeah, because right now that cohesion is just totally missing. I mean, you read the opening paragraphs and the material hooks you with this really specific, evocative image, right?
Right, the happy ginger family?
Exactly. The ginger family, the little girl swinging her legs, eating her French fries. It is this very quiet, domestic moment. But then, almost immediately, the piece just kind of spirals away from that inciting incident into all these lengthy, disconnected tangents.
Oh, it really does. I mean, within the span of a few pages, we are suddenly reading this, sociological breakdown of Japanese dating apps.
Yeah, right out of nowhere.
And then the text hard pivots into the macroeconomic cost of having children in the modern world. Before we can even process that, we're reading about Elon Musk's opinions on declining global birth rates.
It's just so much.
It is, and then it shifts into foreign models complaining about beauty standards and eventually lands on a Mega Man iced coffee promotion. By abandoning the core visual of the ginger family eating fries, the transcript just loses its primary emotional hook.
It's a classic case of a writer getting so passionate about the broader societal implications of a topic that they, completely abandon what brought the audience into the room in the first place.
Yeah, exactly.
Think of this material like a solar system. The McDonald's ad must be the sun in the center. And all these other topics, like birth rates or beauty standards, they should be the planets orbiting.
That's a really great analogy.
Because if the gravitational pull of the ad is lost, those arguments just float away into cold, empty space.
I do get why the author is doing it, though. There's this temptation in cultural critique to prove to the reader that the subject matter is, objectively important.
Right.
They feel they have to tie a fast food commercial to massive global issues. But what actually happens on the psychological level is cognitive fatigue. You're asking the audience's brain to jump from warm nostalgia to clinical dating app stats without a tether.
Right. You don't make an essay feel important by just randomly mentioning important things. You make it feel important by showing how a single, specific thing reflects the whole world.
Yes.
So, the suggestion here is to use the specific visual and thematic elements of the McDonald's commercial as a recurring motif to ground every tangent. Filter the broader societal grievances explicitly through the lens of the ad to maintain focus.
Let's look at how they could actually execute this, because there are a few ways. Take the section discussing the Gen Z desire for mall nostalgia and that 1990s Pizza Hut aesthetic.
Right. Currently, it's just sitting there.
Yeah, it's an isolated observation. But what if they explicitly connected that longing back to why the retro anime style of the McDonald's ad resonated so deeply? Both represent a sanctuary from modern digital division.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that works perfect. The sun stays in the center.
Exactly. You aren't just talking about Pizza Hut anymore. You're using it to explain the ad.
And you can apply that exact same gravitational pull to the tangent about the economic difficulty of having kids. They go on a very frustrated run about inflation and gig economy jobs, right?
Yeah, which feels super disconnected from animation.
Exactly, but you tie it back by pointing out that the ad represents an affordable, accessible moment of joy. It's literally just a family eating a cheap carton of fries. So point out that this simple moment feels economically out of reach for many modern young families.
Oh, that is such a sharp angle.
Right? It instantly transforms a wandering rant about the economy into a focused critique of modern domestic life, all anchored by the visual of the French fry.
Which proves the author doesn't need to cut these larger societal observations. They just need to put them on a leash. And once the narrative is tightly anchored to the ad, the natural next step is examining exactly how the piece defines the cultural conflict surrounding that ad.
Replacing generalized references to the opposition with specific, localized contrasts will make the underlying argument far more robust and persuasive.
Yes, because right now the text relies so heavily on sweeping, vague abstractions to define the cultural conflict.
Very vague.
It constantly refers to they, or a certain type of people, or the batshit screaming far left. And there are these broad claims that families are demonized in the West. This lack of specificity makes the commentary feel like standard internet grievance rather than a sharp analysis of the source material.
I completely agree.
And I actually want to push back gently on the author's framing here. Like, by focusing so heavily on the anonymous backlash from a few terminally online accounts, does the author accidentally validate the very trolls they're trying to dismiss?
Right. That is a real danger.
Yeah, I kept wondering while reading this, would the argument be substantially stronger if it focused on the media industry's reaction or broader corporate trends rather than fighting shadows on social media?
I definitely think so. Giving oxygen to vague internet trolls just weakens the author's authority.
Yeah, it lowers the stakes.
It really does. So the suggestion here is to utilize the specific, contrasting examples that are actually already buried within the text to vividly illustrate the core argument.
Oh, the ones buried near the end?
Yes, exactly. Replacing all this hyperbole with concrete media comparisons grounds the critique and makes the author's frustration tangible. For example, instead of broadly claiming Western ads hate families, elevate the specific comparison they made about the Halloween commercial with LGBTQ characters.
Oh yeah, they barely mentioned that.
Right. So contrast the audience reactions to both of those specific commercials early in the text to actually prove the double standard.
That is so much better because it forces the reader to act as the jury. If you just say the media is hypocritical, the reader's instinct is to fold their arms and say, prove it.
Right, exactly.
But if you describe the visual tone of one commercial and then the visual tone of the other and objectively lay out the reactions, you don't even need to use the word hypocritical. The reader will arrive at that conclusion on their own.
Which is always the mark of great persuasive writing. And there's another brilliant piece of evidence hidden in the text, the brief mention of pandemic-era advertisements.
Oh wow, wait, they really glossed over that, didn't they?
Yeah, they just briefly noted how those commercials featured everyone wearing masks and often felt like they were rigidly checking off mandatory demographic boxes.
That is a huge missed opportunity for a deep dive. The author could vividly describe the visual weight, the lighting, the inherent anxiety of those pandemic ads.
Yeah, paint a picture of it.
Exactly. And then contrast that heavy corporate anxiety directly against the simple, unburdened, mask-free normalcy of the animated family eating fries.
It is a devastatingly effective contrast because it relies on shared cultural memory. Everyone remembers those ads.
They really do. Reader of how exhausting the last few years of media consumption have been. And once you've established that baseline of exhaustion, you've perfectly set up why this simple McDonald's ad felt like such a relief, which directly brings us to the pacing of the emotional delivery itself.
Harmonizing the emotional extremes between aggressive cultural frustration and the pure joy of nostalgic media will create a much more satisfying and resonant journey for the audience.
Because right now, the tone oscillates just way too abruptly. I mean, chaotically, honestly.
It really does. You get serious tonal whiplash reading it.
Yeah. It swings wildly between these beautiful, quiet moments of wholesome personal connection, like the author warmly stating, "My kids have red hair," or "We have the same haircut." And then in the very next sentence, it escalates into intense grievance about going into their villain arcs and creating bigotry.
It totally scrambles the intended emotional takeaway. On a purely biological level, you can't ask your audience to feel warm and fuzzy about a childhood memory in one paragraph and then demand they feel furious about global cultural decline in the very next breath.
No, you really can't.
When an author writes, "My kids have red hair," they are signaling the part of us that wants to rest and feel safe, but pivoting to the batshit screaming far left triggers the fight or flight response. Doing this repeatedly just leaves the listener feeling exhausted and tense.
Exactly. So the suggestion is to restructure the emotional pacing. Clearly frame the aggression and culture war fatigue as the external conflict, while presenting the Japanese media as the emotional sanctuary, and then resolve the commentary on the positive escape rather than the grievance.
Right, like they have that brilliant metaphor in the text already. They call the commercial an ordinary glass of water for people trapped in the desert.
Oh, I love that line. It's so evocative.
So use that as a framing device for the entire piece. Start with the heat of the desert, which is the exhausting culture wars and the pandemic era fatigue. Let the reader feel the heat and the thirst. Then introduce the commercial as the refreshing water.
Yeah. I think of it like navigating a stormy sea. The audience needs to feel the turbulence of the storm, to understand the stakes, but ultimately, they want the author to guide them into the safe, sunny harbor of these cute, uplifting commercials.
I love that analogy, but it means you have to move the discussions of the villain arcs and political polarization to the middle of the text.
Right. Keep it in the first half. Get it out of the way.
Yes. Let the desert be the first and second act, but once the author pivots to the joy of the animation, they have to deliberately guide the reader out of the conflict and refuse to look back.
Leave them on a high note.
Exactly. Conclude the piece by dwelling entirely on the joy, like the Universal Studios Sailor Moon attraction they mentioned, or the Mega Man pixel art coffee and the K-dramas.
Dedicating the final paragraphs exclusively to those elements completely changes the aftertaste of the essay. If you end on the grievance, the reader closes the tab feeling angry.
Right.
But if you end on the unironic joy of a Mega Man iced coffee, you leave the audience on a triumphant note of having found media they genuinely love. You give them the water, and you let them drink it in peace.
Yeah, it transforms a reactionary rant into a really satisfying emotional journey.
So just to briefly recap our 3 actionable suggestions today. First, ensure you anchor the narrative completely around the McDonald's ad. Let it be the sun that holds all of your broader tangents in orbit. Second, abandon vague grievances and instead use specific media contrasts, like those pandemic-era ads, to visibly prove your argument. And finally, structure the emotional pacing to end on the joy of that sanctuary media.
The foundational ideas in this transcript are incredibly passionate, and they clearly come from a place of deep personal resonance. We warmly invite the listener to apply these structural and tonal edits and submit the revised commentary back to the critique for another round of exploration.
When you clear away the scattered debris and focus your lens, you allow your core message to finally command the sky. Keep your focus tight, and your audience will follow you anywhere.